Hey everybody, and welcome to the Fairfax Sports Report. My name is Greg Wyszynski of the Connection Newspapers, DJ Kubelos of Connection Newspapers, and Jeff Graham of the Connection Newspapers. Tonight, we're coming to you live on tape from the studios in beautiful Maryfield, Virginia, steps away from the multiplex, where the Chronicles of Narnia will be unspooling this Friday. Are you excited for that film, boys? Lions fighting minotaurs, fighting
witches and wardrobes.
Witches and wardrobes, talking lions.
Can't wait.
Absolutely. But before we get to that, we've got football tonight. We're talking about reviews of the state semifinals and previews of the state finals, including some interesting news about a change of venue for those games. Plus, we've got basketball review from the past week and a little bit of wrestling preview for the big tournament coming up this weekend here on the Fairfax Sports Report. Before we get to that, let's thank the folks that make this show possible every single week. We are, of course, talking about the Underwriters. Quality Care Ford Service Center, conveniently located in Fairfax, servicing all makes and models, 703-383-6299. And CCI Screen Printing, for all of your screen printing needs, 703-978-0257. Before we get underway with the basketball and the football and the wrestling, all that stuff, let's discuss a little bit of the news and notes from the past week. Some interesting things have happened since we last were on the air, and the first thing I'd like to talk about is the fact that the Virginia High School League Reclassification and Redistricting Committee has suggested and has voted and approved this measure. It now just has to be approved by the Virginia High School League Executive Committee next year for Loudoun Valley to leave the Northern Region and go to the Cedar Run District in the Northwest Region. Now, Loudoun Valley, of course, is a combination district team. They played their postseason in the National District, played their regular season in the Dulles District, and it seems after 2 years, this is something that will take effect in 2006-2007, Valley will be off into the Cedar Run District in the Northwest Region. Is this a surprise to either of you, or pretty much what we expected this sort of to be a temporary alignment for the region?
Well, because they were only really kind of co-members of this district. They played the regular season out in Loudoun and only played the playoffs here. It really isn't a surprise because I don't think he could survive very long in that fashion. So the fact that they're going to be members out there, good for them. They're kind of in a tricky situation being so far out in Purcellville since they can't play in Loudoun because of their population. Anywhere that they're going to go, it's going to be a long trip for them. It was certainly a factor when they were talking about becoming part of the Northern Region. Whether they had the time to leave class and go out and participate in games. So I guess not too much of a surprise for me. Good. Only one season here, though.
Good for them, but also good for the National District. I mean, now you're talking about teams in Arlington. You're talking about Stewart over in Falls Church. You're talking about Edison down in Springfield. They will no longer have to make that trek out to Loudoun Valley for a playoff game. And I mean, I think we saw in this postseason that's also in the regular season, especially in football, that's a pretty arduous task to head out to Purcellville for a game in rush hour traffic. So I don't necessarily know if the teams in the Cedar Run are any closer than the teams in the National District to Purcellville, but at least from a Northern Region perspective, the National District no longer has to make that trek.
And that's what it is. It's more of the Northern Region saying, hey, this is your problem. Let's not make it, these many other schools' problem for that type of traveling, rather than making it one school's issue of travel, not forcing that problem, to other Northern Region schools. And my question is, did Valley almost do too well coming in this year, scooping up some wins from some other teams that could have possibly gotten those wins? So, that's obviously, I don't think that had anything to do with the decision,
right.
but I don't know if that helped their case. I wanted to stick around.
I think it'll be interesting to see, with Loudoun growing as fast as it is, to see, if there's a new school put out in Purcellville anytime soon, how that's going to affect their population. So maybe they're not in AAA for very much longer.
And that's a good point, because from what I understand, Heritage High School out in Loudoun is a school that's right on the cusp right now of being a AAA school. Now, they are going to open up a new school near Heritage, which is going to bring down their student population. And that seems to be what happens every time you get one of these schools that's close. I think Stonebridge is the only school that actually achieved AAA status over in Loudoun County. Heritage is close, but they won't be close enough to actually become a part of the Northern Region. And then also the Northern Region is talking about, this was at the Regional Council meeting today, just floating the idea of maybe once this Loudoun Valley situation is settled, and as it appears it is, trying to go back and revisit the Northern Region's redistricting and trying to align all the fives and all the sixes like they tried to do to begin with before the state stepped in and mucked it all up with those Loudoun teams. So, I mean, in a perfect world, that's what you want. You want the fives and the sixes to be aligned. I mean, I know that it breaks up some geographic rivalries that we don't necessarily want to see broken up, but from a competition standpoint, it makes things a hell of a lot clearer, I think, especially from a football perspective.
But, historically, the Loudoun schools have enjoyed their AA status and haven't liked making the jump. The one school I find it weird is Stonebridge. They've welcomed that jump, and they've done well. Obviously, we're about to talk about their football team going to the state finals in their first year of AAA football. So they're the only school. They kind of break the mold out there. They're one of the more eastern schools. They're more they're closer to the northern region. But traditionally, those Loudoun schools like to run their old Wild Wild West out there, and they don't want to be part of the big city boys in the northern region.
Oh, Wild Wild West. You mean the code word for good old boy network?
Right,
is that what you're trying to
right,
say?
and it is, and they have a good time out there, and great sports. Had a good time covering sports out there, but they like their small town atmosphere of AA ball. They like playing each other. Their geographic rivalries are all built. They're all playing in the same youth leagues. And so when you start taking them out of their area and bringing them over to the northern region, teams like Valley, who are way out in the west, aren't going to welcome it as much as teams like Stonebridge, who are more eastern, could.
And here we are talking about the tragedy of a Robinson-Lake Braddock rivalry being broken up when Robinson went to the Concord district. I mean, those are two schools that are right down the road from each other. Imagine if if you're Stonebridge and all of the schools within your county are playing a different schedule than you are. I mean, the Stonebridge kids grew up playing the kids from Parkview and from Broad Run and those kids, and they don't even see them anymore. So it is a big problem. But I've always been of the mind that 6, 7, 8 years from now, super region, Loudoun's in, Prince William's in. It's a gigantic northern region with all of those teams. Because you can't stop the population growth. I mean, I live in Ashburn now. I mean, that place is growing at a rapid. Every time I blink, there's a townhouse. There's a new townhouse near me.
And it's moving from the east to west. So pretty soon Percival is not going to be that
Right.
town all the way out there. It's going to be big.
I don't know though. I mean, Loudoun has had issues with their growth and population. And watch, I'm going to stray from sports here for a minute, so I'm probably not going to know what I'm talking about too much. But their growth. I mean, they've really tried to fight the growth, especially in the west. They want to try to keep their rural part and their more call it a town, call it a city part, Ashburn and Sterling and those parts now. They're trying to keep the western part of Loudoun more rural, and it is rural. But if they start building schools out there and they start developing out there, you may have to do some sort of super region or give them their own region, because they could potentially put up a new school every year if they wanted to for the next 8 years if they felt like it.
And the two things I'll say about that is, it's one thing to say you're going to protect farmland, you're going to protect the open spaces. It's another thing when there's a developer offering,
Right.
tens of millions of dollars to a single family to give up some acres of their home so you can build townhouses. And the other thing I'd say is that you can't underestimate the fact that the guy who was elected governor last month, Tim Kaine, has come out and said, I'm going to make it an initiative to try to slow down the growth.
Yeah.
So if that sort of thing does get some momentum, then I think you might see those spaces out in the western part of the county preserved a little bit more than just saying that, somebody saying, well, I'm not moving from my farm. Well, then, here's a briefcase full of bullion for you, sir. And then all of a sudden there's a townhouse there the next day. But anyway, that's Loudoun County for you, folks. Moving a little bit closer to home, to Reston, in fact. A change at South Lakes High School with the Director of Student Activities, Mr. Kubaroulis.
Yes, got a chance to talk with Bob Grauman, who's was at South Lakes for 22 years as an assistant athletic director. And he's back there now as Pat Henthorne, who was the Director of Student Activities for the past 4 years, she's gone from the school. Her retirement does not take effect until February 1st. Interesting scenario. They can't fill that position until February 1st. As of now, Linda Jones, the assistant Director of Student Activities, is now the current Director of Student Activities, and she's taken over Henthorne's role and will be doing all of the things that an AD does to make sure everything runs smoothly. And Linda's been there for quite a while and really knows her stuff. And Bob obviously was at South Lakes for a long time. Mr. Grauman just recently helped to restructure the Chantilly program. They've been off to a great start of the year after a rocky finish last year. So Pat Henthorne is gone from South Lakes. Her retirement doesn't take effect until February 1. It'll be interesting to see how they fill that role.
Okay, and then the other thing we want to mention just briefly at the beginning of the show, because honestly, this is a situation, this could be one of those things where we talk about this and then you look out your window when you're watching the show and say, well, these guys are idiots. And we probably are, because we're not weather forecasters. But I bet we do a better job than the people that get paid to do so.
Top or shut?
Top or shut.
Top or shut.
You know,
the
could
heck
you be
up.
right once, top or shut? Seriously, just once. Come within 5 inches of how much snow we get. Is it possible?
Top or shut the heck up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, we do have to
more
talk
time.
about the weather, the weather this weekend. And
Hey, top or
beautiful.
shut the heck up.
There it is again. One more. All right, we'll talk. We'll touch on that later.
jeez.
Anyway, the weather this weekend could be a real problem. It's supposed to be from the last thing we saw, sort of a wintry mix, a little bit of snow maybe coming on Thursday night. School activities could be threatened for Friday. The problem is there are a number of activities that are taking place this weekend that could be threatened by this inclement weather. In fact, the football games, as we'll touch on later, have already been moved to new sites because of the expectation of more wintry weather this weekend. Well, you've got the Northern Region Wrestling Classic on Friday and Saturday. If they cancel school Friday and cancel activities Friday, that tournament could conceivably become a one-day tournament on Saturday. You've got the South Lakes Invitational Gymnastics Tournament. You've got a number of different track meets. You've got Herndon and DeMatha scheduled to play a pretty big game. I believe it's at Chantilly High School.
Yes, that's been moved from American University to Chantilly. There was a scheduling conflict at American, so they pushed the game to Chantilly.
That game is in trouble. And then also, the rest of the basketball action this Friday night could potentially be moved over to Saturday if there's inclement weather. So it's just something to keep an eye on. From what I understand from talking to Tim Gordon at Fairfax, they are going to do their best to get the wrestling tournament in this weekend. If Friday's canceled, then they're just going to try to condense it and have the whole thing on Saturday. There has been some precedent in the past that they've held half of it on Saturday and then finished it up on Monday night. But we'll see. Right now it's supposed to be, if we do get some snow and muck on Friday, then they're probably going to make it a one-day tournament on Saturday.
And they should make it a one-day tournament. I mean, I know as a former wrestler, you want to get them all in one day.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to, have to mess with weight and those sorts of things. And spanning that whole, time, things change, injuries happen. You don't want to try to stretch it out that long. If it's going to be a 2-day tournament, fine. But you don't want to stretch it out, over a Saturday and a Sunday and then a Monday and then a Monday night, after, you've gone to school that day. It just gets too hectic on the kids.
Absolutely. But at the same time, you want to make sure that this tournament in particular, you do have as much of it as you can, because it exists solely to get a bunch of kids that have been wrestling for a while in these sort of tournaments back in the swing of things. It's a real great kickoff to the season. The good news is the teams that come in from out of town, like Tallwood and teams like that, they're going to probably be coming into town before the snow hits. So they still should be here for Saturday's tournament. And that's really what you want to see. You want to see all those teams that come in and participate in this thing, that make it a real special event, get a chance to participate. You just don't want it to be a Northern Region tournament. You want everybody who gets invited to come and get involved. So there's some news and notes from around the Northern Region. But I think it's time for us to look back at a wonderful weekend of football.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Much excitement. Let's start off with the D5 story, which was the fact that Stonebridge just beat the stuffing out of their opponent in the state semifinal, Mr. Graham.
52-12. That's certainly a score that I didn't expect. I don't think Stonebridge scored 50 points the entire year, and you certainly don't expect them to do it against a state playoff team. But the key was getting off to a good start early. They scored in their opening they scored a touchdown, opening drive. Made an onside kick. They were able to score again. Took advantage of a fumble early on. I mean, when you take a 21-0 lead in the first quarter, I mean that really sets the tone for the rest of the game. Matoka, who was the Central Region champion, had to start going for some things that they may not have if they had been trailing, or been a closer game. So just a great performance by Mickey Thompson and the boys over there.
The first time I saw Stonebridge this season was actually in the D5 Northern Region title game against Edison. And I got to admit that I had trouble sometimes following the football with their offense. Did you sort of get a sense that Matoka was having the same sort of problem defensively trying to handle Stonebridge's offense? Is that sort of what attributed to this gigantic score?
Well, Stonebridge is a team that usually runs the wing offense, so there's a lot of motion in the backfield, but they can also go to the spread offense. They didn't need to in this game because there was really one play that was really working. Shamar Knight, just as a senior running back over there, had 5 touchdowns, 183 yards, and 3 of his touchdowns were really basically run the same play. They have the series over there called the spinner series, where he kind of fakes a handoff to another running back and then just runs up the gut. And for some reason, Matoka, it was catching him a lot.
Is that the little move the little spin he does behind the line? I mean,
does behind the line.
literally does like a 360.
Fakes the
behind
handoff
line.
and then just turns and runs right up the middle of the defense. Yeah. And we're talking about a Matoka defense that was putting a lot of guys in the box and providing, being real aggressive. But once, he got through the line, there was really nobody that was going to catch him.
It's a real Tecmo Bowl kind of play.
Yeah.
And I know there's a bunch of people playing Madden 06 are saying, what is this guy talking? It's a real Tecmo Bowl kind of play. It seriously is.
And Thompson said that this is a play that is real effective against some teams, and against some teams it isn't. Like I was telling BJ before the show, when they tried that against Madison, who was real big and thick on the line, the first time that Knight Justice took that same handoff, he got crushed 2 yards in the backfield. This time he was getting far into the secondary before he was even getting touched. And he's got the speed to, that once he gets past people, it's a touchdown.
Once you get into the playoffs, you got to really rely on your system and your program to carry you. Your talent, everybody's talented now, okay? So it's not like you're just going to go out and out-talent another team. And that's, Stonebridge has some talent. Let's not mistake them, for last year's team, who was completely loaded, but they are talented this year, and they have a core group of kids that can run that offense. They are very, very well coached defensively as well. But that offense, that single wing, is so complicated, and other teams who haven't seen it as much aren't going to be able to stop it. Let's put it this way: nobody in the Liberty stopped it, and they had a tape for the past 8 weeks in the regular season. So a couple teams got close. You try to stack the box, but eventually they're just going to chip away, and that's what Stonebridge did, and they did it in a big way this week. So I have a feeling going into that next game, if Hampton hasn't seen this offense before, I don't know if it's going to be that the talent that Hampton has is going to be able to overcome a system that can just walk all over you like they did to Matoka.
And certainly that offense did the same sort of thing, especially in the second half against Edison. I mean, it's an offense that once it gets going, and I remember talking to Terrence Glenn about that, their quarterback. Once they find a play, Coach Mickey Thompson is not afraid to stick with it. And Knight Justice seems to be the guy who benefits most from that sort of philosophy, where if he gets through the line on a couple of those runs, all of a sudden he's getting the ball 7 more times in a row. And each time he's getting a big chunk of yardage. So when an offense is going, it's very, very hard to stop. One game that did not have the offense that I thought it might was the D6 semifinal. Between Oakton and LC Bird. Oakton wins this game 19-16.
Yeah.
A little closer probably than some people expected with the way Oakton was kind of rolling coming into this game.
A little bit closer than anybody there on the Oakton sideline would have liked, too. It came down to literally almost the last play because, and here we're going to see some highlights. We'll get into the last play. That was Kevin Houghton. He's a quarterback. He's also the punter. His punt was blocked there, and Matoka was pretty amped, you see.
LC Bird.
LC Bird in blue, Oakton in white. Now, that's Kevin Houghton. This is Irvin Garner. He caught 5 of Houghton's passes for 135 yards. Here's 75 of them. Right here, and a touchdown. Once he caught that pass, he told me no one was going to catch him. Kind of weird, not really sure why he's wearing number 10 this week. Usually he's wearing number 5.
Is that Charlie Garner's number?
That was Donald Murphy's blocked point after attempt, and good defense altogether by Oakton, held them to about 16 points. Here's Dominic Taylor, 130 yards on 35 carries and a touchdown for LC Bird. Houghton, you see him running here, had an incredible game, his best game of the year, 233 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. You're going to see he was very accurate passing.
Very accurate to the other
team
except
here.
for that
Except for that one play. Exactly. That was the one bad decision that he made, and that one went to the house for a score there.
That field looks great, by the way. What did they play in the sandbox?
Absolutely. The sandbox was out, and that's that right there. That is Jared Green. He makes his biggest catch of his season. It's been a tough year for Jared, but definitely wouldn't trade that catch, I don't think, for anything. That's Keith Payne going over the top, getting his only rushing touchdown of the day. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then here's his receiving touchdown.
That's such a nifty catch.
Perfectly placed catch, and he really went up and made that play. But that was Houghton's second touchdown on the day. As you see, Dominic Taylor's going to find a hole here, but he's quickly wrapped up by the defense, who held him to 130 yards, which isn't great. But you see Jackson Kibler right here holding him out of the first down situation. Kibler made a great play at the end of the game to end the game, basically. This play was called back.
I hope so.
Yeah, or it would have been.
43 was almost over the line when he snapped the ball.
Would have been the game there, but it was called back. And as you see here, Keith Payne actually fumbled the ball. Could have been
Looked
down.
like he was down.
Controversial call. Gives Bird another shot. And as you see, Jackson Kilburg goes up and just jumps that. Ends the game right there. Biggest play of Kilburg's career. Said he's been working on that since he was a young guy. His freshman, sophomore, junior seasons with the coaching staff at Oakton. So you see Bird's got one more chance, but there's Kibler again, forcing the fumble and ending the game. What a defensive game for Kibler.
Well, and there you go. 1916, your final of the D6 state semifinal game. Oakton moves on to the championship game coming up this weekend. We can speak freely on this show, which is one of the things that I enjoy about it so much. And I know that a lot of the folks on the Oakton side of the football are not going to come out and say that they felt hosed by the officials.
Right.
They're not going to come out and criticize the officials.
Sure.
But I think we've heard from a number of people, and you yourself were there, that this may have been the single worst officiated game in the history of the Virginia High School League.
Yeah, and that's a pretty good way of putting it. I was there, at the half. Some coaches were frustrated, and they had every right to be. LC Bird's only offensive touchdown was set up. They got first and 15, first and 10 from the 15 off of a controversial pass interference call on Oakton, which gave Bird the next play they scored their only offensive touchdown. It was an obvious situation of some home cooking. I think some of the refs were actually chumming it up with some of the coaching staff on the home team before the game. Real hometown atmosphere there. Real southern hometown atmosphere there, if you know what I mean. You had guys showing up in their deer hunting uniform and that whole sort of thing.
Pinstripes.
So I mean, it's a real hometown atmosphere there, and I think it's impossible for you to not know the refs because I think it's such a close-knit family there, and I think they just made those calls because that's what they do. That's their team. They live on their football team there. I went to grab a bite before the game, and it was everybody was sitting around at the deli just talking about the football team. So that sort of atmosphere, that sort of take care of your own. But Oakton's not going to come out and whine about it as a classy football team will do. They just go out there and get it done on the field, and that's what they did. And the kids really were fighting against two teams, one in blue and one in black and white. And it's a heck of a win for them to be able to come out of there with the 1916 win. In fact, at the end of the game, it was actually 1914. They were given a safety. Bird was given a safety that, to me, and I'll just give my opinion because I was there, did not look like a safety. So, some controversial things went down. Some calls went the other way. Obviously, we may have had a different reaction from Oakton and the coaching staff if it was a game that was lost. But they had to go out and they got it done.
Yeah. Well, I checked Virginia Preps and the spread was 4. So just kidding. We kid. We know people in the southern part of the state don't put point spreads on games. That's silly.
I do actually want to mention. Kevin Houghton briefly. Houghton has had a season where he hasn't thrown for over 100 yards since the first game of the season against Madison. He's had a pretty tough season for a senior quarterback who Coach Thompson and anybody on that football team will tell you has the ability to throw the football. And as we saw, he threw for 233. Keith Payne and Taylor and Aleppo were shut down this week. Bird stacked the box, and they had to. Let's be honest here. When you get the tape from the Westfield game, Oakton, Keith Payne ran for 244 yards and 5 touchdowns. So what are you going to do? You're going to stack the box. And so if you don't have a competent quarterback to come out and throw the ball, all they're going to do is stack the box and shut them down. And that's why you mentioned earlier we didn't see the offense that we usually see from Oakton. That's why. So Houghton came out, got it done, did throw an interception. But, for a guy that has, waited his turn, he was certainly excited about it to have his coming out party on the state semifinal stage.
And you bring up an interesting point, which is that you look at the team that did advance in the Northern Region, the Oakton Cougars. You look at the teams that didn't advance, Robinson and Westfield. And I think you can honestly say, looking at those two teams, that when the chips were down and parts of their offense weren't working as well as they should be, their quarterbacks didn't exactly make the plays that someone like Houghton made in this game to lead his team to victory.
Yep, absolutely. And I want to give you a crazy stat here. I did some numbers research, and this will tell you something about Houghton's silent play this year, but he's been effective. In 3 of the 4 games in which Keith Payne has been held under 100 yards rushing, Houghton has scored at least 1 touchdown. Now, the only game in which this didn't happen, Oakton lost to Westfield on October 15th. So, we see that, maybe you don't come out and you get the, 200 yards passing like, some quarterbacks in the area, do. But, and you don't get the rushing yards and all that. But he has been a silent but effective quarterback, and that is a sign of a true team because, where you have one-dimensional offense, if one of those dimensions, like you mentioned, Greg, gets shut down and the other one doesn't step up, you're going to lose. And had Houghton not played the way he did, they would have lost, and they'd be at home right now. We wouldn't even be talking about Oakton. So, that's a sign of a true player, somebody who can put their own feelings aside, how they want to play, and come out and just do it for the team. And everybody on that Oakton team loves that kid. So,
there you go.
Impressive victory for Oakton.
Very impressive. Indeed. The basketball. We move on to basketball real briefly because the season has started. We're about a week into it. This whole thing, to me, is right now, you're just trying to get a gauge on where some of these teams are. You do have some pretty intriguing matchups early in the season, but you can't really get a good sense of what's going to happen when these teams meet in the postseason, like the Herndon-Madison game, for example. I mean, it's so far away, you don't know. But you do get a sense of some of these teams, and especially teams that lost a lot from last season. One of those teams was the W.T. Woodson girls team, Jeff, that was the runner-up in the Northern Region last year to Oakton. They come back, they lost their coach, Renee DeVarney, they lost their point guard, Ashley McCulloch, and they lost their post player, A.J. LeMaitre. What did they look like? You saw them against Chantilly. How did they look?
Well, they certainly looked better in the 4th quarter than they did the rest of the game. Here's a team with only one senior, Cassie Donlan, experienced player. She's a real key to that offense. Really didn't score when I saw them against Chantilly. I think she had about 8 points. But here's a team that lost 66-62, but they were down 14 points with 4 minutes to go, and decided to start pressing Chantilly, and they were able to get a lot of turnovers. They got a lot of key performances. Catherine Cochran, I think scored 21 points. She had a game high 21 points. Real effective on the inside. Had a point guard. Mia Nicarado had 5 3-pointers in the game. So I think they're going to be all right. I don't think they're going to reach the heights that they did last year. Obviously losing what they did and having a first-year coach, but looks pretty decent. And Chantilly certainly off to a hot start, 3-0. They're going to be playing West Springfield this coming Friday. So there's a team that has traditionally been strong, but lost a lot. So I think that's another good early season matchup, like you were talking about.
Absolutely, and I think another team that made the Northern Region Finals last year on the boys' side, they also are the regional runner-up, or the Hayfield Hawks. They've definitely had a bit more of a rocky offseason than someone like Woodson has. Not only did they lose their coach Charlie Thompson, not only did they lose 4 starters to graduation, they also lost the Patriot District Player of the Year, Antonio Heyman, who's suspended indefinitely right now by the school and by the team. So they lose a ton, and what do? In their tip-off tournament, they come out and beat Bishop O'Connell, considered by many to be the top team in the metro area, and they upset them on their home court, and it was a huge, huge win for that program. You had Mike Davis in the post, scoring about 20 points and really playing well. You had Chapman Kennedy, the point guard in that team, who moved over from Mount Vernon in the offseason, come up with a big game, about 26 I think he had. So you're starting to see what Hayfield might have left after all they lost, and you can't underestimate what that win could do for this program, kind of being a catalyst to getting them on the right track after an extraordinarily difficult last couple of weeks.
I think this is why Hayfield's proven that they've been the top team over the last 5 years. They win when they should, and like we saw here, maybe they win when they shouldn't. I know there's been some real good teams over the last couple of years. Herndon, for instance, is a team that usually does well in the regular season, and then once they get to the postseason, do not fare as well. I remember, back when they had Ricky Lucas, who was the Player of the Year, Scotty Reynolds' freshman year, they did pretty well, during the regular season. I believe beat South Lakes and then lost to South Lakes in the finals. So I know that's one of the things that Reynolds and Coach Gary Hall over at Herndon talked about this season. They want to play some of these tough games early, and even if they lose, they want to say, hey, we're playing some of these tough games. So when we get to the region tournament, we're not blindsided by some of these good teams, and all of a sudden our kids are coming up short now that they're in the spotlight.
And let's talk about some of those games that the Herndon boys will be playing. I mean, they're playing nationally ranked teams. I believe we mentioned on last week's show. They will be playing one of those nationally ranked teams, DeMatha, Saturday at Chantilly at 7 o'clock. But let's talk about it. They're playing that game after a Friday night game. They're playing their rivalry game against South Lakes, which is no joke. South Lakes is probably the class of the Liberty right now. So, they're playing a tough schedule. They're playing some back-to-back tough games. They're also playing Oak Hill Academy and Montrose, the number 1 and 2 ranked teams in the entire country. So, like you said, they're playing those games to maybe get themselves primed for the postseason so that when they get to that level, they already know what they have. And Friday night, I got a chance to go out and see them play Madison, who some believe could be, Madison Herndon could be the region final, but Hayfield's obviously making a case for themselves. But those two teams are some of the top teams right now in the region. Coach Chris Kublank, after the game, it was a 75-65 win for Herndon, said sometimes you got to be careful what you ask for. And what they asked for was a matchup with Herndon, and they went to Herndon, which is a tough venue to play at. Scotty Reynolds broke the all-time scoring record for Herndon. He did it with a 26-foot three-pointer. Had a very difficult game. When you say that about Scotty, I mean, he still had 28 points, but just wasn't in a flow. Chase Miller, who transferred from Oakton to Herndon, really paced that game. He only had 10 points, but he was dishing out assists, doing some great work defensively. So he's going to be a good asset for them. But Herndon, for them, they really found out what they had. Larry Benyon only had 5 points. He's the big man, okay? But Danny Jones came in and he tore it up. I think he had like 10 or 13 points, somewhere in that range, and he's got a nice little sweet hook shot, can bang underneath, football player. Matt Seeger, also a football player. He's a junior. They'll have him for a while. So they found out that they've got some depth on that team. I'm not sure they've had that in the past. And yeah, we all know Scotty's good, but really going into that postseason, I think they found out in that first game what they've got, and they've got depth. And I think, to have Chase Miller, a starter, anywhere else in the region, coming off as maybe your 6th or 7th man, you got to be a deep team, and you got to be worried about Herndon.
And I think that's been Herndon's weakness, especially I think last year. They really revolved around Scotty, and at least the games I saw, they maybe ran seven kids deep, and that's if somebody got in foul trouble. So in the postseason, when you have somebody go down, injury, or a kid isn't playing well, all of a sudden you're not going. Right now you're looking at your bench and saying, who do we put in? Now Herndon knows who they can put in.
Well, him and Scotty and Larry only combined for 33 points. And Scotty said it best after the game. He said, "You're telling me if I had 28 and Larry had 5, we'd be talking about 0-1 right now." And that's the bottom line. That's the truth. So it's good to see that they've got a well-rounded team over there that can get it done.
And we had a picture in the paper that I want to mention this week in the connection. A couple of kids at the Herndon game decided to create their own Scotty Reynolds Oklahoma jerseys, which I think are pretty darn cool, I have to admit. I think it takes a little bit of initiative and more power to them, right?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Once a student athlete commits to an NCAA school, the websites won't let you actually make the jersey because you're not allowed to do that. So what they did was they actually went on the web before they knew where Scotty was going to commit. And they made the jerseys. Very cool. Got a chance to talk to them. Good fans over there at Herndon.
Absolutely. Yeah, good people. Like the cut of their jib.
Good peoples.
One more note about basketball. Unfortunately, this is kind of a sad story, actually. Lauren Robinson, who's a great basketball player, transferred from Hayfield to South County in the offseason with obviously a number of other students from Hayfield going to that new secondary school. She went over with a couple of other great players from Hayfield, and it looked like South County was going to be a legitimate contender this year in their first season in the Patriot District. Well, she was ruled ineligible before the season, and right now it looks like that ruling is going to stick pending potential appeal to the state and then potentially to sort of an arbitrator of some sort. But right now, unfortunately for South County, it looks like Lauren Robinson, who is a great front court player, is going to probably be ineligible this season, which is going to probably impact them a bit in the Patriot District this season.
I think that's been the word of the last 2 or 3 months, eligibility.
The ineligible word.
I'm tired of it.
It's
It's
a
the
tough
E
word
word.
around here.
I hate it.
And
Tough word.
lo and behold, who do we find in the state finals in Division 6? The 2 teams that had to deal with that.
The 2 teams that had to swat away the slings and arrows of their anonymous rivals. There you go. Kind of ironic. Speaking of the football, we'll get to that in a second. I want to throw out this little nugget before we get to some wrestling talk, which is that the financial numbers for the Division 5 and Division 6 playoffs have been released by the Northern Region Council, and they're sort of interesting in the sense that everyone would kind of assume that the championship game in the Northern Region in D6, the Oakton-Westfield game, might have been the highest grossing game, but in actuality, it was the semifinal between Robinson and Westfield at Westfield. That turned out to be the biggest gate of the playoffs.
Asterisk. Let's put an asterisk next to that.
Why?
It was over the Thanksgiving holiday. I think a lot of people went home,
It was
including myself.
Thanksgiving,
I wasn't
and
even there.
there was a bit of a higher expense, I believe, in the championship game. I think more porta-johns maybe. That was the expense.
Well, then maybe Robinson brought more fans to their game than Oakton did. I mean, the Oakton-Annandale game was the least grossing of the three.
Well, they
So
also
maybe there's something to be said about the
think
number
about
of people that come out for Robinson.
think about it. They also played Oakton-Annandale also played the last week of the regular season. So I think a lot of people already knew what was going to happen. They took their week off. So
That's insane.
possibly.
Are you saying that people didn't go to a playoff game because they thought Oakton would win?
Yes.
Oh, that's garbage. That's the dumbest theory that's ever been extolled on this show.
100% absolutely.
Seriously,
what I'm saying.
that is.
Why?
Why wouldn't you go to a play? It's a playoff game.
Yeah, but the
it's not
ticket
even
prices are like $50 now. I'd rather bank that money and
Are you
that
talking
they were
about
gonna
Oakton
win.
fans or Annandale fans?
I'm talking about Oakton fans. Annandale.
You don't think Oakton fans would go to a game they know their team's going to win?
I don't think so. I think they. I know it sounds crazy. I know it sounds let's go watch them blow this team out. Maybe they thought they would, but they played the same game in the last week of the season. Maybe if it was staggered, maybe if they played Annandale earlier in the year. But it's kind of like going to see a movie 2 weekends in a row. I mean, it's the same thing, and it was almost the same exact score. I think it hurt them. In fact, some people at Oakton talked about that exact fact.
That's crazy.
I think it did hurt them.
That's crazy talk. I would totally go to see Return of the Jedi 2 weeks in a row if
so
I know that
would.
Luke's still going to win at the end and the Ewoks are going to dance at the end. Because it's what I want to see. If you want to go see your team win, you're going to see them win in the playoffs.
Leave it to you to make a Star Wars reference when we're talking about football.
That's true. I'm sorry. Guilty as charged.
Greg walks into the office like this every day.
Star Trek.
Wyszynski.
Sorry.
Grumble under
I got to get my Star
I'll
Trek.
grumble under my voice now.
Star Wars, right?
The other thing we want to mention about Division 5 playoffs, there's been so much talk about Stonebridge and Loudoun Valley coming into the region this year. What impact is that going to have? Well, basically, they doubled the amount of money they made last year in the D5 playoffs this year based on the fact that Loudoun Valley and Stonebridge get their fans out to their games in a big, big way.
And like Thompson said, he feels like they've been playing at home for the last 5 weeks, and they have. I mean, they had 2 regular season games and 3 playoff games. Now it's time to hit the road. Unfortunately.
Oh, those PowerPoints are pretty precious, and it keeps you at home. But put it this way, with the money and Stonebridge specifically, you are now marketing to a completely different audience that you didn't have, which is more people from this area that never came your way because their team wasn't a part of what you were doing. So you now have a totally new audience to bring out to games. And I think it's a good thing. Like I said, they're the easternmost school for Loudoun. I think they're in it for the long run, and I think they came out and made a statement this year.
There you go. Wrestling this weekend, obviously the weather is going to be something we have to keep our eyes on, whether or not it's going to be a 2-day or a 1-day tournament. The Northern Region Classic is annually one of the coolest events, I think, that you can find, especially early in a sports season. You have so many athletes there. Granted, some of them aren't in the weight classes you're going to see them in towards the end of the season, but you do start to get a good sense of who the contenders are and who the pretenders are when it comes to Northern Region Wrestling. I think the team that has the most buzz coming into this season right now are the Robinson Rams. They make the move from the Patriot to the Concord. For them, it's not too much of an impact, although they won't see West Springfield and Hayfield. They will see some great teams like Oakton and Herndon and some traditionally strong programs out there. They bring back a number of really solid wrestlers like Ryan McCullough, who's probably going to wrestle 125 this season. He's the defending region champ. You got Madu Fierro, who is a 2-time state qualifier. You have Matt Jones, our defending region champion, who's ranked first in the state right now at 171. And they have a freshman by the name of George Billy, who will wrestle at 103 right now, and he's ranked in the state right now as well. So they are a very, very strong team. The team that Brian Hazard, the coach at Robinson, said we should watch out for, and whenever a coach mentions his rival, it should sort of send up a flag that he's either trying to shoot some happy gas your way or he's serious about them being a strong contender. Lake Braddock has 14 wrestlers back from last year's team, and a number of those wrestlers placed in the top 6 in the region last year in their respective weight classes. So they are definitely a team to watch in the Patriot this year, and then maybe on a regional level.
Danny Bryan, Lake Braddock's heavyweight, is out with a broken hand. Heavyweight is one of those divisions where there's 2 or 3 kids that could take a region title. I know Chantilly has Marshall Cottingham, and Centerville has Colin Miller, 2 guys that are probably going to duke it out in the Concord district. So there's a lot of good weight classes this year where there's a number of kids that could win it. There was a number of graduates last year, so some kids that sophomores, juniors this year that are gonna really make for some good wrestling.
Mm-hmm. And Adam Fitterer, we should mention, from Fairfax, ranked 2nd in the state right now at 140. Of course, his brother Joe was a big time contender a couple of years back for the Rebels. But again, BJ, you are has been established on this show. You are a child of the southern part of the Commonwealth, and when you go to those state rankings. When you go to the state rankings online and you look at all the wrestlers, the thing that you see over and over again in every single weight class.
Cox High School, right?
Cox High School,
yeah.
Great Bridge High School.
Yeah. Same
Same 2 teams. What makes it such a dynamic area for wrestling down there? Is there anything you can put your finger on?
I went to Cox High School. I wrestled, and you can be a backup at Cox High School, and you can go to any other school in that district and probably start for that team. I was in that situation. I wrestled behind a regional champion, and that's the type of thing to keep people in the program. You see a lot of schools. I don't know if that happens up here. I haven't been around long enough to see it, but teams are deep at the beach. It's a pride thing to stay on the team. I don't know how it is here, but that's why they're so good, because they can fluctuate their rosters. You've got so many kids on that team that are willing to tough it out, and there's so many kids in the wrestling room. You've got to do crazy things to give each kid equal time. But I don't know if that's the case in the northern region, where you may have 5 good wrestlers and everybody else you've got to make do with. And that's really the key in the beach area. You have so many kids to choose from, and it's because of the youth wrestling that they have there. They've got great feeder systems. They've got the high school coaches, wrestling with young kids, getting them involved from an early age. Same thing with the field hockey programs down there, which are also good. Great feeder programs, great youth programs that really get you from a young age and help you to really fall in love with the sport. But yeah, like you say, you've got, I see a kid right now, Walker Faison, down in Cox High School, my alma mater. He's ranked number 1 in the state. Now, here's a prime example of what I was just talking about. Walker was a little ankle biter that used to come and run around the wrestling room when we were all wrestling. And this kid was a prodigy from that age. We all knew he was going to be good because he'd come in there, little kid, and start wrestling with our 3-pounders and jack them up. So, it's like that. And these kids learn from an early age that they can win. Doesn't matter who you are and how old you are and how big you are. And so that's the prime example. I'm 24 years old now. Walker's a senior in high school, and he's probably going to win a state title. So that's what I'm talking about, really keeping the kids in from an early age.
Absolutely, and I think that the more successful programs in the region, especially you look at a team like Robinson. Robinson is constantly a team that constantly gets these kids that are wrestling from a very, very young age. They come through wrestling families. You think about the Fosnock family, for instance, of people that have just kind of come through a family, come through a club program, and then are ready, like this Billy kid, as a freshman to step in and challenge potentially for a state title. But then again, on the other end of the spectrum here in the northern region, we have programs. I remember, Lee and South Lakes are 2 examples in the last few years. Programs that can't even fill every weight class and are forfeiting weight classes in dual meets. So it really kind of spans the spectrum. You have programs that are consistently good, that have consistently been able to produce a high level of talent in several weight classes, and you have programs that just can't seem to even find enough wrestlers within their own school to fill the weight classes.
Right, I was talking with Centerville's coach Joe Radoon, and he has two kids in the high weight classes that really could challenge for region titles, and he says he has 25 kids on his entire team, and that's up from last year. So and that's the case. I mean, you're really struggling to even go too deep in certain classes, whereas schools like down the beach, there's 3-4 kids, just waiting for an injury, for somebody to be 5 pounds heavy and then they could step in. Whereas here you have have one kid get injured, and all of a sudden you're forfeiting that class.
Let me put it this way. When we wrestled Great Bridge, I was a backup to Ryan Pond. Now, Ryan Pond was, our 130-pounder, and I kind of fluctuated between 30 and 35. So we go to wrestle Great Bridge, which is the biggest, the returning state champions, it seemed like every year. And, I finally get a shot to go in and wrestle. And who am I wrestling? I'm wrestling a state champion, okay? So, it was that kind of thing. They could fluctuate their roster to stick people in there and still be confident with what they have. Of course, I lost, okay? But I mean, the point is that
I don't think we were questioning that.
The depth was there. I gave that kid a hell of a fight, by the way. But the depth was there, and that's why those schools are so good. Let me tell you a school who's going to be good around here. Langley is going to be great. They've got some depth, and they've got some kids that can. They think they're going to fight for a state title this year, or excuse me, a region title this year. They got some good lower weights. Michael Bowman's back. He had a great freshman season. All these kids that I'm going to mention were one round away from making it to the next level.
Right. Some
from the state level and some from the region level. So, they got a kid, Kira Batterpay, who's probably going to be. He's the captain. He's one of the older guys as a senior. He'll be at 160, 170. Got a bunch of guys that are going to fill in. Peter Delaney is a young guy, sophomore, going to do a lot for him. So Kevin Canto as well. All those guys were right on the cusp last year, and I think Langley is going to be a team to be dealt with.
Got it. Speaking of the next level, let's talk about the next level of the football playoffs, the final level, if you will, of the football playoffs, the state championship games. Change of venue for these games, we understand. Just getting this news right before the show. Where are these games this weekend, boys?
Well, Division 5 will be in Norfolk, as we're told, and Stonebridge will be going up against Hampton, which has won 16 state titles in their history. All of a sudden, it becomes a big-time road game for Stonebridge. And like I said before, playing at home, for the last 5 weeks. Now they're not going to the central part of the state, which is Richmond, and a pretty fair site. Everybody kind of has to travel a little bit. Now Stonebridge has to travel a lot. And
we should mention that from what we understand, the University of Richmond Stadium, which was supposed to house both the D6 and the D5 title games this weekend, it's a problem with snow and ice. It's a problem with them getting the field and the facilities in order for these games this weekend, considering that they're probably going to get some even more snow and ice in the next couple of days. So the games were moved. But like you said, I mean, do you think with that sort of home field advantage that Hampton's going to have, I mean, is that going to really affect Stonebridge, or do you think they have a real good shot in this game?
When I talked to Mickey Thompson after this last game, he really liked the fact that they were going to be able to travel down to Richmond in the same day. They weren't going to have to stay overnight. They were going to kind of be able to stick with their same routines. Now with a 12:30 kickoff, they're not going to be able to get on the bus at 5 o'clock in the morning and go down there. They're going to have to stay overnight. And he said the last time that they were in the state playoffs and had to travel overnight and stay in a hotel, the team really wasn't able to focus. Maybe that was something that he can learn from and get them to focus better. But he just felt better playing and traveling on the same day. I mean, that's a concern, and also, being in front of I'm sure what's going to be a robust Hampton crowd. That's not a long trip for them.
At all. I mean, that's like us going to Reston. It's a small drive. I mean, and let's be honest here. Stonebridge is now walking into Hampton's home field advantage. I mean, they have to walk in and rip it out of a 16-time state champion's hand. That's a tough thing to do, especially when you're basically walking into their house. This was a neutral site. I'm not sure about the decision here. I'm not sure if I'm a fan of it. And Oakton's going to be facing the same problem with Lansdowne. They're going to be playing in Hampton, which is right down the street from Virginia Beach. And all those Lansdowne fans and then other fans will go right up for that game. Whereas I don't know if it would have been the same case if all those fans for Stonebridge and for Hampton and Lansdowne would have to travel to Richmond. I'm not sure if they would get that hometown atmosphere.
Well, I'm sure neither one of you are happy with that decision. You got to schlep down there. I get to go to Fairfax High School this weekend and cover wrestling. You guys have to head down to North Carolina basically to go cover a bunch of football games.
It's gonna be a little homecoming for me. I'm gonna go see my parents and have some nice little Greek cooking.
Oh boy,
it's gonna be nice, man.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's a home field advantage for those teams, and both teams, which most believe to be are the actual favorite already, Lansdowne has looked to be the favorite as they won the state title last year, beat up Robinson to do so. And Hampton, boy, they've really produced some talent in the past years, some notable talent. So it's going to be a tough test for these teams to not only go on the road but walk into someone else's house.
Absolutely. Before we start breaking down this Oakton Lansdowne game, let's briefly. I think we have some information about the venue we want to share with you, good viewers at home. The D6 State Championship game, as you see, there is a change of venue. Darling Stadium in beautiful Hampton, Virginia. If you want to.
It's not beautiful.
I don't know, man. I'm just trying to. I mean, the team's called the Crabbers, for Christ's sake. Hampton, Virginia. If you want, you can of course MapQuest it. There's some crazy URL on there that I'm sure you're scribbling down as we speak. It's at the corner of Victoria and Kecoughtan, of course. Obviously. You know where it is. I mean, I'm not. All right. So anyway, that's where the game is. Last year, I was at the Robinson-Lansdowne game. Percy Harvin had the single greatest game I've ever seen an athlete have in any sport, basically winning that game by himself. So the question is, what can Oakton do against the Lansdowne team that is probably a little bit more talented beyond him than people give him credit for?
Yeah.
But definitely, he is the guy you got to watch.
Well, Percy Harvin is the current AP Player of the Year. He won it as a junior. Which tells you something, AP Player of the Year of Virginia. And to do that as a junior and then have a whole senior year left to do it again, which we're pretty sure he'll, get all the votes as well. That's a tough test to try to shut someone like him down. I think he had a touchdown in every possible way last year against Robinson, which was a damn good Robinson team. So, he also gave Hilton fits. He had an interception, which he ran back, a 100-yard interception, and really racked up the yardage on the ground. The only thing I'll say in Oakton's case is they had a pretty tough test against a guy named Evan Royster up here, which is a highly touted recruit. Not sure how he stacks up against Harvin, but they were able to game plan for Royster and shut down Royster. And if they could do that against someone who was supposed to be the top talent in our area, maybe they can game plan for Harvin, but he can get you in so many ways. That's the issue.
I think that's a great point, and that's the difference to me between him and Royster, is that Harvin can attack you in so many different ways offensively. He's good enough defensively, where Robinson was very concerned about throwing to him last year, and give Coach Beatty and his team credit. They do get creative in the ways that they get the ball to Harvin. It's almost like how Westfield used Eddie Royal a few years ago, trying to utilize him a little bit more on some end arounds, on some reverses, not just chucking him the ball downfield all the time. That's kind of how they use Harvin, and it's a scary situation to try to control a kid that explosive, and not many teams have been able to do it. And it'll be the challenge of the game for Oakton to do that.
I think one thing in Oakton's favor is that, obviously people knew Harvin was a great player last year, but maybe they didn't know how how great. I remember last year at this time, I asked Coach Mark Benworth at Robinson, has it been your experience that one player can really dominate and take over a game? And he said no. And then we saw what Harvin did in the in the finals. So Oakton knows what Harvin can do, and it's their job to kind of figure out and scheme ways to try to limit his damage.
Well, let's talk a little bit about their offense, which he obviously leads. I mean, the guy's a Mr. Everything. I think he's thrown touchdowns. I think he's caught them. I think he's ran for him. He's probably run back some kicks. The guy has done everything, and he's going to take his pick of where he wants to go anywhere in this country. He's one of the top recruits in the entire country. Put it this way, I saw some highlights from one of his games all the way up here. Okay, let's put that in perspective. I saw highlights from Percy Harvin, who plays in Virginia Beach. I saw his highlights up here in Northern Virginia, and in that game, Urban Meyer, the coach of Florida, was at that game on the sidelines with Beatty and the Lansdowne staff. So that will tell you something. A player commands the head coach to come and stand on his sidelines of a program of that nature. Wow, that tells you something. But Lansdowne has only scored under 40 points twice this season. Okay, they've scored over 60 4 times, and they've scored over 50 points 3 times. Oakton has only scored over 50 points 1 time in a 54-7 win over Fairfax.
And this isn't Fairfax.
And this is no Fairfax, and that's the truth. I mean, let's be honest here. Oakton hasn't shown the ability to put up huge offensive numbers, and they're going to possibly have to in a shootout because they've got a good defense, but I don't know if they're going to be able to contain someone of Harvin's caliber. We'll see how it plays out. Obviously, they got Royster, so you can't rule them out. But wow, it's a big test. They haven't seen anything like him.
You've mentioned Royster a few times, and I don't think that you can discount the fact that Oakton has played against premier players. They've had the game plan around guys that can break a game open. Plus, they've already now been through a game where they faced an incredible amount of adversity on the road in a playoff situation. So even if Lansdowne does come out and put 14 points on the board and Harvin goes nuts on those first two scoring drives, well, I don't think that Oakton's going to, pack up their bags and go home. I think they're going to stay in there. I think this is an extraordinarily professional team, and I think they're battle tested to the point where they're going to be able to hang with Lansdowne, even if Lansdowne comes out in the beginning and slaps them in the face.
I talked to some of the players after the game, and I said, all right, guys, so, Keith comes out and runs for 5 touchdowns against Westfield, and then Kevin comes out and throws for 2 touchdowns and 233 yards in the playoffs in the state semis. If you're Lansdowne and you have the last 2 tapes, what do you do?
Yeah.
It's pick your poison.
And we've talked all season about their balance.
And that's the balance that they've been able to show. That's the mark of a good team.
All right, real quick, let's talk about picks here. D5 title game, Hampton-Stonebridge. Who do you like, Jeff?
Well, I mean, I like Stonebridge because I know Stonebridge. Don't know a lot about Hampton. I think out of the 2 games, I would have to think if somebody's going to win, it's going to be Stonebridge because I really think Oakton's up against it.
What about you with the D5 game?
52-12 this past week in Stonebridge's favor. I don't see them slowing at any time. And like I said, with that single wing offense, I don't think people know what to do with it yet. And I think maybe Hampton will have the talent, but I think Stonebridge has the scheme that's going to win the game.
I think I'm going to have to go with Hampton in this one only because, like you said, Jeff, the break in the routine for Stonebridge, they've been able to kind of have the luxury of being a little bit closer to home in some of these games. I just think a break in the routine like that is really going to mess around with this football team.
And based upon what's happened this season, they've won a lot of close games, a lot of games where it could have gone either way. Maybe their luck runs out.
That last one wasn't close.
Not the last one.
So you mentioned that you think Lansdowne's going to have Oakton's number in the D6 game.
Lansdowne's played in the last 2 state finals. Westfield was a really complete team that beat them 2 years ago. Last year, Lansdowne ran all over Robinson. When Oakton was in the state finals last time, they didn't even score.
There you go.
I think they'll score this time, but not enough.
BJ?
4 years ago they were there. These freshmen remember Keith Payne's calling for a win, so I'm going to have to go with Oakton.
I will never, ever go against the Percy Harvin team.
I
in the state final after what I saw last year.
I picked against them in Westfield, and I've never lived it down, so I got to go with it.
All right, boys, coming up on the Fairfax Sports Network, want to mention the high school game of the week. The AAA State Final D6, Oakton and Lansdowne should be a fantastic game.
I think it's the only game of the week this week.
Sunday at 6, repeats daily at 5 a.m. and 6 p.m. on Cox 35. And visit us on the web, www.fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. Quality Care Ford Service Center, thank you for underwriting us. Conveniently located in Fairfax, servicing all makes and models, 703-383-6299. And CCI Screen Printing for all of your screen printing needs, 703-978-0257. I will breathe now. Okay, very good, boys. Well, again, exciting week of football. Thanks for watching, everybody. Oh, next week, if you do get a chance, please check us out. I believe there's an award show happening.
Oh,
yeah, that's
yeah.
right, an award show.
Oh, yeah.
It'll be very exciting. I encourage you all to watch. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great football weekend, and stay safe in the snow and all that good stuff.
Lord, you win an award. Tune in next week.
Who knows? We don't know.